Scramble, scramble, scramble. I don't have tea. Well, I just made tea. What up, everybody? And welcome to Late Night Live number 16 on today, September 29th, 2020. How's everybody doing tonight? How are you all? Like 1 minute to go, I went, ooh, gonna drink some tea and do a Late Night Live. And I didn't have tea! So, my water decided to take a very long time to boil. Water boils slower when you're in a hurry, I think. But we're here. Noon in Hong Kong. What's going on, everybody? What's up, Courtney? Long time no see. All right. I gotta figure out something changed on Instagram. Normally I post the swipe up to the link to come to YouTube or whatever, but in the one I just posted, that's not an option. I don't know if they're limiting it to like once a day or once every certain amount of time, but I couldn't do a swipe up feature on the post I just made. So, gonna have to figure that out. Luckily, people can follow the link in my bio, but it's not quite as convenient as swiping up. Prepping for your Wednesdays. That sounds very serious. Oh, tonight's gonna be a good one. Continuing on, please let me know, volume-wise, as per usual, how we're sounding. This is a new playlist. Today we're listening to the YouTube Audio Library's ambient chill songs. I haven't heard any of them. There might be some repeats from previous weeks. But I just downloaded a whole bunch of them and chucked them in a playlist. So hopefully they're good. I don't know. If the vibe's no good, then change it. That's easy enough to do. Volume is awesome. Sweet. That's good to know. Thank you very much. So last week we worked on this stem right here, and we worked on the compound curve stem, my favorite lately. Oop, that one right there. And then we combined them, and we also did the horizontal entry oval variation, and then combined them into this guy here, and then just for fun, did the this crazy one. So which means we covered those 3 stems. I'm gonna do a few of those just as I get myself warmed up, so nothing new right away. Just gonna do a few of those on a sheet of paper to get myself warmed up, and then we're gonna dive into this one here, which we didn't do last week yet. Give you guys zoom in a little bit more. You're so far away. Hey, Fozzie. Yeah, nobody fall asleep. Just because we're listening to Zen music. Floaty Zen, relaxation, sleepy time music. It might end up being a little too calm, or it might be perfect. Who knows? We'll see. All right, let's warm up. Get some writing done. See if my camera is in the right spot. Stir my white ink. Right on. I had some good writing sessions this past week. It's been a nice week for sit-down sessions. I feel like next week I'm gonna have to have a few real-world adulting things I gotta take care of, so I don't know if I'll have quite as much time to dedicate to these specific strokes, but that's okay. I also have some digitizing that I really want to do. A lot of stuff a lot of images and whatnot I took on my trip to New York last February. I still haven't fully digitized, but it's a matter of cleaning up about 3,000 photos, which is rather time consuming, unfortunately. But it should be worth it when it's done, because there's a really dope collection in New York, and to my knowledge, there are no photos of it online yet. And I would like to share it. Alright, we'll see. I might have to swap out this nib in a little bit here, because it is extremely sharp for this black paper. Might be a little too fine for this paper. Did anybody practice their capital stems this week? Or no? That makes for a busy Wednesday, Courtney. Wow. I get to teach. I'm teaching a tap class and a locking class tomorrow that I'm super excited about. It's gonna be fun. I think it's gonna be fun anyways. Your stems don't look as much of a stem yet. That's okay. It'll become a stem eventually. You just gotta keep working at it. Actually, before I get started with the new stems today, I want to share something with you guys. I was gonna wait and read through this later, but I feel like I may as well do it right now. Glad you like the music, Aravind. It's chill. This is the type of music I'm usually listening to. If it's not this, it's like classical piano or something like that. But this is the kind of ambient, relaxing, floaty zen, as Fozzie says. But I want to read you guys something that I discovered this week. It's not like any new revolutionary, amazing concept or thing. It's just, it's one of the first times I feel like I've really read about it in the old documents. I stumbled across it when I was pulling all the Mataras, the 11 pages that we were talking about on the Discord this past week. I found it when I was going through all those, and I'm surprised I'd never seen it before. But it's a series of 4 lessons. If you want to read along with me, the PDF for that document is in the description of this video, so you can download it from my website. The PDF includes the writing samples of it as well. Each page has a lot of text and then writing samples. I decided just for myself, because I want to actually read it on camera, I just made this copy with just the documentation. This isn't a PDF that you can download just because this is all it's already in that PDF. But it's an interesting concept about sort of stepping away from all of the flourishy stuff that we usually do and focusing down on the elements, which is essentially exactly what we're doing in this live and in last week's live. It's all been about going down to the fundamentals and taking out all the pizzazz and just focusing on the elements that make the letters the best. The Avanesh, that's a good point. They did listen to music. Some teachers actually they would specifically drill to music. I would assume other ones just had music in for ambience. I know there's some records out there that actually have the Zenarian name on them. I've never heard them. I'm trying to figure out what exactly those are. But anyway, so this document, like I said, it was I'm surprised I'd never seen it before, but once I started trying to find it, they released it as a supplementary, like, mini lesson. It was going to be 4 pages, basically, released over a number of months. And in tracking it down, lesson 1 I discovered in March of 1910. In that issue is where it showed up. And then fast forward a couple months, June of 1910, they had lesson 2. And my brain was very confused because in the beginning it said it was going to be 4 lessons. They mentioned it's going to be a 4 lesson sort of thing. And then, so June 1910, I found the second one. Go a few more months to November 1910, and there was the third one. And the third one is where it very first states, like, it gave them the months that the first ones came out, so we know that it's all in the same lesson. And it says the blah 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 of the 4th lesson. It's talking about the first lesson of this 4-lesson course. So we know 4 lessons. Cool. We have the third one done. Then something happened, and this happens relatively often. I've found in the old magazines. Printing was, I think, a little unorganized at times. It must have been. Also, it was December 1910 that Mataraz passed away, so they had memorial things, and all his plates got put in to a lot of the magazines. So I think that sort of threw their regular printing plan for a loop a little bit. Because then I just kept scrolling, just hoping that I would find this next lesson, just reading basically the title of everything, hoping that I would eventually find it, and hope that they just didn't decide to not print it. In 13 months later, December 1911. So fast forward, more than an entire year goes by, and they released number 4, but it's titled Contribution Number 3 in Plain Professional Penmanship. And it talks about how this is the 3rd and final in a 3-lesson course, which is hilarious. It just means in that year, they totally forgot how many they were posting. Like, they forgot what was printed in November, I guess. So it's a huge, like, misprint, but it's definitely part of the same lesson, which is hilarious because it talks about the first contribution appearing March 1910. So literally like finding a needle in a haystack. It's not the first time I've seen this happen. It's the most extreme case of lost documents. Sometimes they're like little mini paragraphs in the bottom corner of one of the pages that you just have to hope you find, or you have to sift through really closely. But you can imagine, fast forwarding a year, that's a lot of sifting. And there was a lot of other lessons, like Darner had a series of lessons that happened in that same amount of time. A whole bunch of stuff was happening in the journal, so it was quite difficult. And I was very happy when I finally found the 4th and final installment of this course. So I want to read it now, though, because it is fascinating. You can, like I said, you can download it and read it at your own time, but I feel like reading. Different than I've ever done on an Instagram Live. I apologize if my reading isn't super smooth and amazing. But here we go. Lesson 1 in Plain Professional Penmanship. Plain penmanship is a style that is often neglected by ambitious penman students who wish to reach the highest degree of skill in ornamental penmanship. To master this style of writing requires vigorous drilling of principles. That's what we're doing in these lives. Page after page should be filled with such principles as the capital stem, direct ovals, indirect ovals, etc. We're doing in these lives as well, until strength and stroke and uniformity are secured. Plain penmanship is known among professional penmen as a standard style. On it, the ornamental is built. In other words, it is the ornamental writing minus the flourishes. So this is what I always talk about. If you've ever taken a design class from me, or I'm certain I've mentioned something of it or like it in the past, this is the important part. This is when I call the foundation, the letter form. That's what this is. This is the base form of ornamental penmanship. When you take all the other stuff out, the other stuff is extra. The spaghetti, as they call it, that goes on top of it, is extra to this. In mastering the principles, it is well to use considerable speed occasionally, much more than is ordinarily used. That might be a little scary for some people. What's going on, Ashok? But they recommend a lot of speed, which I've never read that in a lesson either, that told you to sort of go faster while you're getting something. So I like that concept. It is well known that after working vigorously for a time with considerable speed and force, the forms seem easier when one falls back to the usual speed if the high speed had not been connected. Sorry, not a great reader. So I've mentioned this before as well. Going fast, trusting yourself, diving into fast, letting it be bad, but once you get that under control, going at a comfortable speed is going to be like breezy and much easier. I keep losing myself here. Be sure to give this idea a good trial in all of your practicing. In order to execute plain penmanship well, one must have good control of his or her movements. In this style, there are no flourishes to assist in obscuring defects. That's a good, I like that line right there. I might write that as a quote. There are no flourishes to assist in obscuring defects. It is therefore a splendid style to master in order to lay the proper foundation for ornamental writing. Awesome. The next lesson will contain small letters as well as capitals. The third lesson will be made up of names and addresses, while the fourth and last lesson in this plain style will be composed of a letter. Following these 4 lessons on plain penmanship, we will begin a short course on another style. I haven't found that course yet, but I'm looking for it. We believe that it will be beneficial to result in the lessons. This is not as important. Good paper, ink holders, all that needs to be used. Be sure to supply yourself with the best materials if you wish to make satisfactory progress. So, there's lesson 1, a cool insight. You guys can let me know. Keep reading. I can read through all of these, or we can write for a bit and I can come back to them. Tell you what, I'm going to read one more and then maybe I'll stop after that one, because maybe reading isn't exciting for everybody. Can I turn this way so the... Nah. In lesson number 1 in Plain Professional Penmanship, which appeared in our March number, we presented a set of capital letters. If those letters have been mastered, your efforts on this lesson can be confined mainly to the small letters, and in connecting some with the capitals. The capitals in this lesson are smaller than presented in the first lesson, and for that reason are a little more difficult. Cool little idea, playing with size as a way of training different difficulties and different strokes. Letters of medium size are, as a rule, easier to execute, and the smaller they are made, the more difficult they become. It is well, therefore, for those who wish to thoroughly master penmanship to try different sizes. It is also well to try different slants, different spacing, etc. That is one of the most beautiful things about ornamental penmanship, in my opinion, is it's not confined to a specific spacing rule and a specific size rule and a ratio rule. You can play with all those things. And the more you play with them, the more you get used to doing different things. So when you go back to the way the way it was originally done, or a more traditional way, that's gonna feel easier because you've broadened sort of your scope of ability. Wow, this is a really dense text. Fully lost my spot. The mastery of each will give you some strength and control of movement, not to be secured in any other way. The tall, compact style gives strength and control in the in and out movements, while the wide spacing and the running hand give you force and control in moving to the right. Both very important. Then, in trying the different styles, you are more likely to find the style that fits your makeup than if you stick to one style. So this is where people have heard me talking about, each penman had their own style. They didn't just decide to write like another penman. They trained everything. They practiced everything and found what worked best for them. Because none of us are built the exact same. Unless we're twins. Many young penmen start out with the determination to write like Mataraz or Taylor, or the Taylor style, not knowing that there is the style suited to his makeup just as surely as Mataraz is suited to the makeup of Mr. Mataraz's style, and Taylor's style is suited to the makeup of Mr. Taylor. Had Mataraz adopted the Taylor style and stuck to it, it is probable that there would have been no Mataraz. So that's a really interesting tidbit. If Mataraz trained and only trained to mimic somebody, he would have never been Mataraz. He would have never had his own iconic style that we all know so well. Mamed, this is a PDF. It's in the description if you want to have your own version of it. I just took out the photos so that I can read just the text. But the PDF I put in the description for you guys. It is a 4-part lesson in plain professional penmanship. Brilliantly worded. One of the best worded penmanship documents I have ever stumbled upon, which is why I'm going out of my way to read it and not just say, go read it yourselves, because it's so easy to get distracted by the pictures and stuff. And it's just, I like the way it's worded. Had Taylor adopted the Mataraz style and stuck to it, there might not have been, or there might have been no Taylor. Even genius has its scope and limitations. The style that expresses your individuality is the best style for you. Endeavor then to thoroughly master the numerous styles for the purpose of finding your own style. Master the numerous styles for the purpose of mastering or of finding your own style. Another good little soundbite tidbit there. In penmanship, as in any other work, the sooner one finds himself, the better. There is a time for mastering the standard styles and for copying the work of others, and there's also a time to strike out for yourself. This instruction might not do for the beginner in practical business writing, but in the realms of ornamental penmanship, there is plenty of room for cultivation and exercise of individuality. So that if you're doing business penmanship, that is what they're saying basically is you want, it's pretty much like following the ductus. It's got clean and precise sort of elements, like doing engrosser script or copperplate round hand. You kind of stick to, you want to train that style. Ornamental penmanship, there's a lot more freedom that comes into it. In fact, the greatest charm any specimen of penmanship can possess is the expression of individuality, which of course through cultivation has reached a high degree of artistic perfection. The orator is not merely an imitator, although he is very familiar, he may be very familiar with the charms of other orators. The great painter is not a copyist, although he may have labored long and hard in endeavoring to reproduce some of the works of other painters. The penman should first master the standard styles, endeavoring to reproduce some of the work, reproduce them as much of the skill of. I am not a good reader. The penman should first master the standard styles, and then as much of the skill of others as he possibly can in order to cultivate his artistic talents and in order to find that style which is best suited to himself. After that, she should strike out and express himself in his work. Cool, right? That is such a, that is a brilliant little piece of information. Yeah, I'm not gonna read the other two right now. They're in the PDF. You can check them out at a later time. I want to get to writing. Like I said, I mean, I've read countless articles and whatnot about penmanship, and this one just it really, to my knowledge, is one of the only ones that really talks about this topic, and I think they expressed it in a really great way. All right, let's get into our practice, shall we? So last week we did the stem stroke like so and the compound curve stem, both of which having the shades starting at the halfway point. Today we're gonna go into the indirect oval and full oval shade. So it's gonna shade from the very top to the very bottom all the way down. Very similar in movement to the first one we did last week. This will be a relatively easy one. I personally find it easier than the ones we did last week, but it is nonetheless an important one. All right. Stir my writing. Will I continue reading the next lesson? Yeah, I can. We can write for a bit and I can read the next one. I don't remember what the third and fourth one specifically talk about, but I will read them. Like I said, I just discovered that those lessons yesterday. Okay. Here we go. So the one we're working on today, we're going to go at our slant angle. We're going to do some indirect ovals to warm up our arm. The one downside to writing with Zen relaxed music, well, I guess some people might fall asleep, but there's no beat to keep your downstrokes on, so this will not help you in in metronomic writing. But that's okay. That's not really what we're focused on today. Good night, Devin. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, so here we go. We're just gonna go straight into it. The same indirect oval. On the slant line. I'm not using a guide with the slant line today, so I don't know exactly what angle I'm at, but not too worried about it. I've written to pretty much everything, or with pretty much everything. I don't listen to trance music all that often myself. All right, now let's get that shade in there. So full shade from top to bottom. Oh, see? Started way too late. Once your brain is in capital STEM mode, it's hard to convince it that it's okay to start the shade higher. There we go. That's better. Nice even taper from top to bottom. Mine are still a little on the low side. I gotta start my downward force a fraction sooner. There we go. That's what I want. That one's still. We could start that a little bit earlier and we'd be in a good spot. So for the people I know, not everybody in here is using movement writing. If you're writing slower, same principles apply. We're going to come up, start applying the pressure, thickest point and thinnest point. Not the greatest oval, but you get the idea. But you can see the difference. Obviously the angle is off, but how this one, it's going to be much easier to start in the right spot, start tapering into that shade. If you're working slow, than if you're working quick. If you're working quick, you can either slow down a little bit, or your muscles gotta quickly be ready to start that pressure on the downstroke, which is something that I clearly have a little bit of trouble with because I've been practicing stem strokes so hard for the past little while. My body doesn't want to do a stroke sooner. It thinks it's breaking my own rules. Can I talk a little about rhythm and movement writing? What specifically do you want to know? When I talk about rhythm, I know everybody talks about, or not everybody, but you'll see a lot rhythmic writing, or all writing has a rhythm. I don't specifically keep like if I'm writing a word, it's not the flow of that whole word going into it. I don't do that when I write. Personally, I use the rhythm specifically for specific like individual strokes. With ornamental penmanship, as we well know, there's lots of places to stop. You can lift your pen, you can take a breather. So it's less for me. I know it can definitely have to do with the flow of an entire piece, and it's the rhythm of a piece can mean many different things. When I speak about rhythmic writing and whatnot, I use it to force a specific timing. Or, for example, just for this stroke, the rhythm that I'm thinking of is just the up down, the and one. Is how my brain would call it as a dancer. The and one, the downstroke would be the one, and the and would be on my way up. So that is the rhythm. So for me, it's not specifically about like the and one happens and then we go straight into the next one. The reason in my Art of Movement Writing class, I just learned the word metronomic the other day and I'm into it. But the reason I do music specifically or writing specifically with music is less about expressing that rhythm in music. Like I'm pretty sure how Dennis Brown does it. It's how James Faz does it when he does his polyrhythmic class. it is less about expressing the rhythm of a song or a piece of music or something with the writing, as it is a way, it's an easier way for me to keep my students writing at a minimum speed. If I give a rhythm to follow, it's everybody has that trigger to follow that rhythm. Downstroke, 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 downstroke. Specifically when we're drilling, doing drills and whatnot, the rhythm again has less to do with about a rhythm of a song, and it just keeps you going at a specific speed. So you're training like uniformity in that way. Um, Whereas, oh, and I know in my classes, and because it happens in every business writing class as well, the teacher will say you have to do this quick, so everybody will plan it quick, and then as soon as the pen drops, everything slows down because people are trying to get more control. So for my class, I want to ensure that everybody is going at the same speed. The speed that I go in my class isn't specifically the speed you have to go, but it forces you to go a speed that tells me, the teacher, that you're doing at least what I want the way I want it to be done, if that makes sense. So I can gives a better handle on the entire class, and everybody can sort of flow together with it. Please show some practice of the letter C today. Can't watch live session. I don't know that I'm going to be doing specific capitals today. I think I'm just going to be doing just the stem strokes, just like last week. But I hope that makes sense. There's a lot of ways to break down rhythm in writing, and the way I usually use it has very little to do with like the rhythm of a whole piece. It has specifically to do with training and muscle training, ensuring a specific a tempo, basically. What kind of music do you play? Actually, when I don't train with rhythm writing, or with music usually. I'm just in my own head, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I want to do something specific, like when I'm practicing business penmanship and stuff, I will use a metronome. I don't even use music. I could use music, but I don't. I use a metronome because it's just a clear tick that gives me a sound to follow. But for myself, when I'm practicing on my own, I know that I'm going to be going fast enough. Also, the dancer in me is keeping rhythm, and I've trained my entire life on uniform tempo and rhythm and stuff like that. So I don't personally use music when I practice myself. When I practice in class with people, I use the metronome. I don't use music because it allows me to fine tune. If something is slightly too fast for the class or slightly too slow, we can pick it up and slow it down without having to fish for specific beats per minute songs. Okay. Metronome, I believe, and metronomic is the word that I just learned that I'm a big fan of. There we go. The chat to the rescue. I realized that you just asked, how do you spell it? And I just told you how to spell it. I just said the word again. That's not very helpful. Sorry. Whoa! What is going on with this crazy shape? There we go. It's a little better. The shade is still a little low. My thickest points are slightly lower than I would like them to be, but I'm not going to be too picky. Don't test my spelling, it's not very good. So you'll notice some of these get a little bit of the standard capital stem ending to them. That one, and you can almost hear it when it happens. There's the whip that happens at the end versus the standard indirect oval shade just kind of happens. There's no extra sound, there's no whip, there's no extra speed up or anything like that. It should just sort of flow out of the pen relatively naturally. I can hear it in mine because I am a little heavy on the bottom, so there's that little bit of my own muscle memory wanting to do a capital stem. I'm doing oval stem and my arm goes, capital stem! It just wants to get that little cha at the very end. They can, the Hunt 101, if you're not controlling it, but any nib will really do that depending on how you press. I'm not using a Hunt 101 today. Actually, for the first time in a long time, this week I started using some old Leonard Principles again this week to get some finer lines as I was working on practicing a little bit of my lowercase the other day. To the villain. Evil. This is the Z oval, yes. Or the Z shade. There we go. You can hear it. I don't know if you guys can hear it in the microphone. But it is, you can hear it when it's a bad one versus a good one. All right, nice and smooth. Whoa, missed my hairline. I'm being very cautious of my hairline because this pen is very sharp and it's just like, it's talking to me. It's going, I dare you, man. Press a little harder. I'll nib snap. I dare you. It's testing me today. Another thing I'll mention, because I'm focused so much on the upstroke, in the ones that I'm feeling the whip on or that aren't feeling as good, as flowy, I'm feeling more of my hand come into play than I would like. When I remind myself to let the arm do the stroke, they come out much nicer. So it's when you think about one thing, your body and mind might forget about some of the other things we're supposed to be concentrating on. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things to concentrate on. So it's just reminding your arm and body to do the work for you. If you do it right, it'll be super easy. Whoa. Yeah, there are lots of metronome apps you can use. Or you can use a physical one if you're somebody who happens to own a piano and has one of those old ones, or has a physical tick-tocking metronome. They work great. I need to get one day, just for fun. Okay. So not many of the letters use this specific stroke. I could be misremembering, but pretty much the Z. Oh, excuse me. It's my body telling me I haven't drank any of my tea yet. But there is the Z, and then the B as well as that might be it. Or the version of the Q if you use that variation. The X as well, right? Yeah, that was a sneeze. A tickle in my nose. All right. So the main difference, like when we go from the Z to doing it in a B, it's the same thing. It's like doing the stroke we did in last week, the direct oval, the standard oval shade. If we, for a capital E, it's that same shade, just brought a little bit lower, done a little bit less vertical. What's going on, Mom? It's a weekly thing. Mom pops into my life. You're curious what paper this is. This is just black gel paper from eBay that I got years ago. It's not good paper. It's not great writing paper by any stretch of the imagination, but it gets the job done. And it is, you have to be really fine in order to not get snaps and stuff with it, with a really fine nib. So it does, it'll be infuriating if you don't have a super fine nib. But it's good practice, I guess. But not great writing paper. But the E, how it's a smaller stroke, similar with when we do the B, the capital B. The same rule applies. Some very good ones. Come on, do a good one. That's better. It's the same idea. We're doing this implied oval, and we're shading from top to bottom, just like we're shading from top to bottom in the exercise. Yeah, it's cheap paper. I think a lot of people use it. Unfortunately, there's a hold version, and then there's a version that doesn't have holes in it as well. Last time I looked, I couldn't find the one without holes in it. They're slightly different companies. I think slightly different. No, they're obviously different companies. I think the non-hold version I used was a little bit worse, if memory serves. Can't remember exactly. It was a long time ago. You get it and you'll have it for a long time, basically. But it's the same on the B, it's just smaller. So it's just getting that control. The main difference, or the difference you have to consider, depending on how big you want your shades to be, if I'm doing a full-size oval like this one here, from top to bottom, I'm getting a nice big shade. Now, depending on what I want my B to look like, I personally want the B shade to be the same size as the long shade. I just want it to be shorter, but I want the thickness of the swell to be the same. So I have to just press more, or press faster and release faster to get the same size, but a quicker taper in the B, if that makes sense. Some people will have the B a lot smaller because there's less vertical space, so more like these two here. This one's quite thick, this one's a little bit thinner. Or this second stroke could also be done bigger, depending on what you're going for, so it sort of matches that one. Stylistically different choices. I like, my goal, doesn't usually happen, but the goal for me is to have them all sort of be standard thickness. The part where that gets troublesome is some stems are easier to shade large than other stems. So, practice. Could you just explain where the shade starts on the oval and where the thickest part is? Yes, of course. So on an oval, and it's the same whether it's the B or the Z or either direction it's going, we have our oval that's on whatever slant line we're writing at. It's probably around 52 or 48 or somewhere around there. So we have our middle point here. For this shade, because it's the full oval shade, your shade is starting at the top and finishing at the bottom. So it means at these 2 points, we are a hairline at those 2 points. And then we're doing an even taper to the middle. In this instance, the middle, we take the opposite slant line and we bisect this way. So this is going to be our thickest point of the oval. If we're doing like we're doing today, indirect oval shade. The shade is going to taper into that one and then taper out of it back to a hairline, and then the same on the other side. So the heavy part is, if we break it down in half this way, it is the thicker point is below, but it's below because the whole oval was rotated. So it is the middle of the oval when split that way. Cool. That is why when we do the direct oval, people always say keep the shade high. Same idea. When I do a direct oval, we do a direct oval here and it's split in half this way. Bisected on the slant line. We bisect the opposite direction. That is our thickest point. And like we did up here, if I were to split that in two, we have our top, we have our bottom, we have the middle. The thickest point is going to be above the middle, but it is at the half, it is in the middle of the oval. If the oval was perfectly vertical, these aren't perfect ovals, but you get the idea. If the oval was perfectly vertical and not on the slant line at all, then the halfway point would be the middle. So the thickest point of the shade would be right smack dab in the middle, top to bottom. Depend either if we shaded either side. The thickest point will be right in the middle. But because we're rotating the oval on the axis, it's going to be thicker above or below the line, depending on what oval we're doing. Yeah. Okay. Now, a little exercise I want to do. Similar to yesterday when we went back and forth between... Here, I'll leave that sheet of paper. Yesterday, we went back and forth between our two stems, or our four technically at the end of the day. We did the first one. We did the second one. What was the second one? Oh, we did the... And we did the third one. And the shade, we were going for all similar shades. And we were doing them back to back so that we got used to the extra stuff that always came back to this same shade. Now what we're going to do now, if you're riding along with me, if you're not riding along, you can do this at another time, or I just think it can be a really helpful exercise. Going back and forth, we could just pick this first one, for example, but going back and forth between the stem shade and a indirect oval shade. That's too many confusing words. All right, so we have our stem shade we did yesterday. The Z shades are They take work. So we do the one we did, I keep saying yesterday, last week, followed by the Z shade. Followed by the first shade, stem shade, Z shade. Wait, getting snaps. This is potentially an annoying exercise, but I feel like it's a good one to do and to get used to. Trains you to be able to go back and forth between the two, because you're gonna have to. If you're doing writing and you have to write an M followed by a Z, you're gonna have to be able to go back and forth between those two. or the M and the B. The B is different because it's squished, so it doesn't feel the same, but it's important for, I think anyways, it's important for your muscles to be able to differentiate between these two strokes. Yeah. You're lost. Lori, what can I help you with? Don't be lost. M and I uses a stem stroke. It doesn't use a Z stroke. M and I use the same shade. Here, I won't write over my drawings. So one benefit right now, obviously, unfortunately, right here, I'm a little low, but one benefit of using the lined paper like I'm having here, or when I print my guides, I usually print them out at 5/16, so I have a halfway line, and that shows me, it gives me a really good indicator of if my stem strokes are starting too low. And if my Z strokes, let's call them Z strokes, indirect oval shades, if they're starting close to that line, they should be up here. So it's a good way of, it's just nice to have that line in the middle. Ah. Well, Lori, I apologize that you feel lost. A lot of times the lives are not, like, this is almost like a class. The way I'm sort of breaking this down and the way we're doing this practice session. Not all the lives are like this. Many of them are just hanging out. Some of them are just me writing ridiculous things and people suggesting words. So don't feel lost. Just hang out. If you want to join in, follow along. If not, you can hang out and chat. Yeah, the last week and this week have been a little more topic based and structured as far as practice sessions, because they're things that I want to practice myself. So I'm just basically talking people through my own practice and taking questions when they have them, if they have them. Too high. Ooh, that's a good Z shade though. Hang out. Sounds good. Where'd our music go? Is there still a song playing and I just can't hear it? Some of these songs are a little too on the Zen side. Oh, see? I'm right in the middle. I need to be up here. My Z shades are a little bit too low. Because ideally, this is what we should be looking at. Stem shade, full long shade. Ideally also the same width. My long shades are a little bit thinner. For no good reason though. I just need to make them a little bit thicker to match. Or chill out my stem shades a little bit. The idea. Do you find that checking your movement in the middle of the Z stem helps control the stem? By middle, do you mean up here? Or by middle? If you mean up here, for the Z stem, I don't like to change my motion whatsoever in the Z stem. I want to keep the movement nice and fluid as much as possible. From top down to bottom, like I would do just an oval. I want that to have a nice up and down flow, no checking of movement or anything like that. In the middle of the shade, definitely not. For me, there's no movement checking basically in the middle of any shade. Once the tines have started spreading apart, I want to keep, like I mentioned last week, accelerating, like driving, accelerating through a turn. When you're starting shading, I want to keep that movement, because if you don't keep that movement going, you're going to create friction, and that's checking movement in the inside of a shade is where when you talk about drag, that's where that type of stuff comes from. Yeah, so for me, once the shade is going, it's we dive in until it's done. Like for me personally, you can see it when I do the stem shade variation, I slow down ever so slightly. It's unintentional. It's not something I do on purpose. It's sort of a subconscious thing, but I do slow down right before the shade. I don't want to, but it gives me that, when I get into the hairline to come down along the slant line, it gives me that little bit of time on the hairline that I have trouble doing at full flow movement. But I would much prefer full flow movement if I could do it that way. I know a lot of penmen slow down and have different movement and whatnot. I try to not do that as much as possible. I like when everything flows smooth together. You gotta push through it. Either rotate the pen or push through. If you stop or slow down, your tines are just gonna dig into the paper, and that's gonna cause all kinds of no funness. There we go, back and forth. Stem shade, Z shade. Stem shade, Z. Blah. Tongue twister. Whoops, too low. And my white, it needs to be stirred. Well, I like Zen. I'm all about Zen. With the music, I always ask about the music because I have it playing extremely quiet so that the microphone doesn't pick it up. And sometimes because these songs are so zen and quiet, what you guys are hearing is much louder than what I'm hearing. So I sometimes can't hear what song is playing. And if I turn it up so I can hear it good, it'll be way annoyingly loud for you guys. So it's finding that perfect balance of volumes. Okay, stir the white ink. Gotta figure out what you're doing wrong. If you record a couple videos of you doing some stems, and put them on the Discord, I can take a look, and I can maybe give you my thoughts. Because with movement, there's no need to be getting, or we shouldn't be getting drag or anything like that. Oftentimes, I would think it was an ink issue or a nib angle issue, potentially, if it's not a speed issue. But yeah, if you film a video and put it on the Discord, I can take a look. Whoa. Whoops. Okay. Now this is one of those exercises where I could fill pages and pages of it. But what I want to try to do is we skipped this one because we didn't do this the first one here. So last week we did ink on my pen. Don't leave wet ink on the pen because it will dry and make you mad later. There we go. So we did this in hairline, coming down and around to there. But all we did yesterday, we skipped these first three, and last week, we did this one with the compound curve shade around into the stem shade, trying to keep the shades approximately even. Now, we're going to do the same concept we've been working on, going back and forth from stem shade to oval shade, stem shade to Z shade, but all in one. So connected. Same flow of that stroke, into that shade there. So that's what we're going to do now. It's all right, Fozzie. We're all allowed to have bad writing days. Welcome, Lori. Today we're diving in deep. And in practice, like the books say, this is not something you wouldn't do 2 lines of this exercise and go on to the next exercise normally. I'm just getting through all these steps for everybody. I can't be on YouTube Live for 12 hours of a practice session. So these are the things you would fill pages of this exercise, just like last week when we did exercises, and then we have well, you guys would have seen on my Instagram stories, but the pages afterwards of the practice that happened off live, practicing that stroke, getting it in the muscles for every stroke until you get more of them right than you get wrong. I don't remember the exact quote. I believe it was Zayner who had a quote where it talks about getting, if you can do 9 of them right out of every 10, then you're good to move on to the next to the next lesson. All right. So we're going to do a compound curve. Let me get a new sheet of paper, actually. Compound curve stem into a Z shade. That last stroke. Oh, you mean this one? That's the crazy one. That one's really tough. We can do that one with the same shade we're working on today as well, that we didn't do last week. Those exercises can be found in Lessons of Ornamental Penmanship by C.P. Zayner. If you want the crazy one, the crazy one with the 3 shades in it is in the 1909 or 1908, 1909 version of Lessons in Ornamental Penmanship by C.P. Zayner. In the newer releases, the ones that sold in the 1920s, that page was taken out for some reason. I don't know if they decided it was too crazy, too difficult, or what, but it was removed. But that doesn't mean we can't do it anyways, just for fun. There we go. Do a few of these in a hairline. I have a bad habit of not bringing this stroke up high enough. So I gotta make sure I bring that loop over. Also, one thing I sort of thought of last week when I was practicing that I didn't mention in the live, because I didn't really think of it prior to the live. Remember how I was talking about having an issue getting that slanted oval right here? Instead of having I would always have a big round one. One thing that does help a little bit, I still have trouble getting that angled oval there, but if I put energy into this stroke right here, into that curve around, into that coming down stroke from about here to here, that helps for some reason or another a lot in keeping this narrow for me, because it goes straight from that stroke, and then you think about this over curve that we've been doing so much today. Just that focus on that downstroke tends to help me anyways. That doesn't mean it'll help everybody. I'm just letting you guys know sort of where my mind's at when I create that stroke. Oh, wrong stem. Oopsies. Yeah, this nib does not like this paper. Starting those shades really low. Can we practice more swan strokes first? Of course we can. So we are going to, let's take a step back then, and we'll do, tell you what, we're going to do this stroke. We're going to bring it all the way around, so not just a regular standard swan. We're going to continue it going, so that gets us practicing this stroke here, and also this downward motion. So we're going to practice that stroke, and then we'll go back and forth. We'll do a couple of those, and then we'll do the standard Z stroke. It's Nib Snap City over here today. So we'll do the compound curve stroke. And then we're going to do the Z shade. And then we'll do the compound curve stroke. And then the Z shade. Compound curve stroke. And a Z shade. Baby steps. Not baby steps, regular, small steps. We'll get there. Our compound curve shade. Ooh, that is a really nice exit oval. It's beautiful and almost round. I like when the exit strokes come out almost round sometimes. Okay. Pointy on the top of that one. Ah, so you're saying the compound curve one, you start too high? You start up here? This one, this compound curve stroke, it is, I've said it in the past, it is one of, in my opinion, the most difficult like drills that you can do for ornamental penmanship. But it is also one of the ones that when you drill it, in my experience, it shows more improvement in the rest of your writing the more you practice it. Like when I practice this stroke, whoa, messy exit oval there, but all of my writing looks better. Why? Don't know. It's compound curve, getting that shade at the very end. You would be doing yourself a favor if you gave some dedicated time to just practicing that compound curve shade over and over and over again, and forcing yourself to not start that shade until halfway down. Ashok, if you haven't watched last week's live yet, I kind of recommend that you dive into it and maybe follow along and write with me on the video. I do talk a lot, but every time I'm talking, you can still be writing. You don't have to stop every time I talk. But if you get into that on the compound curve stem, and then when we started doing the compound curve stem back and forth with other stems, I think those exercises, doing those drills over and over again, can be extremely beneficial. Because it's like, even myself, this shade right here started too high, and it ended here. I would much rather it ended back here and started up here. It's one of those strokes that really wants to start sooner than later because of that compound curve stroke, especially for anybody out there who's practiced engrosser script or copperplate or roundhand before. because you're so used to doing that beginning, that entry compound curve stroke that is evenly shaded, so it makes this stroke just that much harder, unfortunately. So you gotta push it to the very end. There's no secret to it, unfortunately. This is the specific swan stroke that we talked about last week was just this same compound curve shade, but ending on the baseline. Just like that. When you do them, some people say they look like little swans, almost like they had little beaks and feet. That's a horrible. It doesn't look like a swan. But that is what's referred to as the little swan stroke. I just today am continuing on because we're working towards that one drill. Yesterday last week, we did a whole bunch of these because stopping there was a natural point. We started that shade from here, and then from there we went to this one. And then from there, it's that same shot, that stop. So all our shades are ending the same way. So that's why we end there. And then once that feels comfortable, then you move on and start adding either a half oval or a full oval to the end there. Like it can end like so, or continue all the way around. Yes, last week I made a T-Rex out of it instead of a swan for fun. I need to make a better one of those, but not today. Whoops. Writing a little bit too far away from myself. Yep, I would say just some hairline ovals. Just movement ovals over and over and over again to get that feeling. One other benefit to listening to chill music like we are today is definitely if you focus on the music for a moment before you write the stroke, take a deep breath, relax. The more relaxed you are, I know it sounds counterintuitive or it doesn't sound right, but the more relaxed you are, the smoother you're going to have those ovals are going to be because the muscles are going to be relaxed and they're just going to create the shapes you want nicer. It sounds like the opposite of what you want to do, but I promise you, it's legit. All right, I'm going to do one more line of these separated, then we're going to go back to connecting them. Compound curve stroke first. So this right now is accomplishing the same thing as we were doing on the last page, doing the same entry stroke, switching between the two different shades. Now we're accomplishing the same thing, just with two different entry strokes. So just one level higher, I would say. Hey, Marilyn. Well, you just missed working on the Z shade, and then basically just moving on from what we did last week. We did the Z shade, and then we combined the Z shade with the standard shade that we did last week. And now we're further combining them, going back and forth between the compound curve shade with the Z shade. I'm starting these shades way too low. They're supposed to start up here, but that's pretty much it. Slow going. Today we're just taking our time practicing these ovals or these shades. I'm glad you're learning a lot. That's good. All right, now there was our one last line of those. Now we're going to start combining those two strokes together. Yeah, how was your hospital experience? No moving, just studying. So one thing that I am going to make a note of, or a reminder for you guys, when we go, if you're following along with me, and you're now doing the combining the two strokes, it is important when you place your arm. If you don't, depending on how much range of movement you have here, and everybody's slightly different with how much range they can reach with the flexibility of their forearm. It is important when you set up that you have the range for both this stroke, and you're in a place where you can also get down far enough, up far enough, and here. Oftentimes, if you get set up if you set up for like this oval here, you'll write, and when I get to this point, my arm is already like stretching too far, and I'm losing control. It's hitting like its edge of its range of motion, and then the same thing happens when I get over here. I'm sort of hitting the edge of what my forearm can do. So it's important that you you place your forearm down in sort of a neutral middle point. For me, it would be where this oval is here. So you place your arm down so you're ready for that oval, and then you do the other strokes in the middle of it, if that makes sense. Nice, that works. I gotta get that Z shade higher. That's the idea. That's the Z shit I wanted. Oh. Yeah, don't take the skin off your arm. That's not helpful. It could be. It could be a logo. Stroke. I am having a heck of a time starting my stems low enough. As you can see, or starting them high enough, that one's higher, which is good. But I have to continually remind myself to start that shade much higher. I find this one much more difficult than doing the version we did last week. There we go. That's the idea. Slow is fine. That helps your eye understand where you're going. Okay, one more line of these, then dive into something else. That's a good second shade. Compound curve shade wasn't as good as it could have been, but the Z shade, I'll take it. This isn't a letter. This is just 2 stem strokes. This doesn't create any letter at all. You could create letters out of it, like this could be, let's see. It could be a P and an X, if those were connecting or touching. But this isn't a stroke you would use in creating real letters. It's specifically training the stems and connecting 2 stems. And the connecting, it is training us to connect 2 stems, but the goal is not to be used as connecting 2 stems. What we're technically training is our muscles to learn other movements and stuff to keep flowing together. So it's less about what we're creating and more about this stem or this stem and this stem and flowing between one to the other. So training movement and stems at the same time. Yeah, this would be a perfect connection for a T to something else. It could be a T to it could be an H, it could be a K. Technically, you can make any stem out of this one. The go-to, my shade is too low, but it's a really easy Z to come out of there because it's technically the shade we're doing is the Z shade. Nice! Spencerian logo for the win. That's good. Congratulations, Ashok. Well, the Z is too slanty. That's just because it's not a good Z shade. Technically, let me try to do a really good one here. Because this is the standard stem for the Z. So if this was a T, and then if this was a Z, it would be like so on this flat line. That's still even a little too angled, but that's the idea. It should be the second oval should be shaded perfect like that on our slant line. All right, one more of those, and then I'm gonna go on. Gonna do something else. Okay, so next, we're gonna move on. We're gonna add a new shade to our report, to our dictionary of shades. We only have one main one left from the book here. The samples have other entries and entries to some of these shades, but the only one that we haven't really touched on yet is this guy here. Now, I will be completely honest, I'm going to try doing this today this way. I've never liked this stroke. It's always given me trouble, and I always like continuing on from it. More like so. I like working on it this way. I like going down and up. I feel like that's a really silly place to lift. But so many of the books do it this way, and I don't know why, but I'm gonna try it their way for a little bit, but then I'm gonna probably do more so like this, not back to back, just one at a time, working on that shade. I just like flowing out of it more so than lifting. Looks like a rat ear. The Queen of Hearts collar. Yeah, it's roughly a rat. I mean, yeah, the bottom one. It could be a rat ear. Be a Ratatouille logo. I missed a phone call. Who phoned me? I don't know. They didn't leave a message. Okay, here we go. So for this stroke, I'm going to start. I'm actually going to start with this top one, but without a shade. I'm going to start up here like this. Just one at a time, though, just to get that flow. Over curve, down, and back up again. Like so. Ooh. Now I'll do a couple of them back to back. It'll be a little challenging. For some, this is a more challenging shade. For others, it's a little bit easier. I find it a little bit challenging, but I find the shade is less challenging as my issues comes in from this point to this point. Oftentimes you can see it a little bit here. It gets bubbled out a little bit on the way up. The over accentuated weird compound curve, which is why I always recommend not thinking about adding curves in there, and they just they happen on their own naturally. All right, we're gonna do two of these together now. So up, down, up, down, up. 5. If this was happening in a movement class, I would be counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Up, down, up, down, up. Oof, my nib wants to catch this paper so... Ooh, there it is. So bad. I can feel it. Okay. This is super weird. That's alright, Fuzzy. Mom's gotta do what mom's gotta do. Yep, the first curve going into it is just an over curve. We're just going over curve. And then we have compound curve down, compound curve up. And then if we continue to keep going, compound curve down, compound curve up. So the only one that's not a compound curve is the entry overturn. And now our shade, similar to the Z shade, is a hairline at the top and a hairline at the bottom. And then right in the middle, same thing, it's the middle of opposite of our slant line. Right here, the middle point is our thickest point. So we're going an even taper from that first hairline, even taper to the middle, and then even taper out again. That's the key to making this look like a really nice shade. Oftentimes you'll see it where it looks like that is a hairline here and a hairline here, and it's not an ugly, it's not a bad looking shade by any means, not bad at all, but it maintains a very even thickness in the middle. Now this one, I could do a much worse example. I guess this one is not as bad as it could be. If it goes and gets that straight line, that is what we're trying to stay away from, how it's keeping this steady thickness all the way down, even though the line is compound curving in the middle there a little bit. We want that taper to be going from hairline to the thick stroke and then back to the hairline again. It's getting that taper that makes this stroke tough. So I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna do it in just one at a time, similar to what that first instruction was, but up, down, up. One thing that always happens to me is I get this very straight right side, and then my thickest point gets down, it's a little too low. It bubbles out down to the right side, as if my nib is doing a direct oval shade. So the definitive wiggle in the middle, not one side. Yeah, it's not one side as the other side is straight. I mean, you would oftentimes see it. Sometimes that way with one side straighter, similar to sort of what I did here. But ideally, it is both lines are getting slowly thicker and then slowly thinner again. So they still have a little wiggle in the middle. So when we're doing it, if you're doing it at speed, if you're using movement, it's similar to getting the shade started high enough on the Z shade. You really got to start quick so that it comes, so you don't end up with what I had here where all the shade ends up at the bottom. You got to get the shade started nice and quickly. Too quick. That's better. About how big would you say the shade is? By big, do you mean how tall? Or just how thick? The thickness is the same as your other shades. For capital letters that are this high, you want your width to be similar to the Z and the other stems you were doing. As far as how big vertically, or like when does it start? It starts right at the top and right at the bottom. So the shade, if we look at their example here, The shade is the same thickness as the other stems, but it is tapering from that top point all the way to that bottom point. So it doesn't maintain that middle bit. So there is not really, how big is the shade? The shade is basically as thick as you want it to be in the middle, so long as the taper is even into it and out of it. That's the tough part. This is one that'll give you trouble. I know it gives me trouble doing it large, because that taper becomes rather abrupt, and then it starts looking more like a copper plate stroke and not like a Spencerian shade. This is also, if you've ever heard me talk about or have studied Signwriter script versus like Moderat script, for example, this stroke is one of the strokes that makes the big difference, or makes a big difference. The way it tapers versus the way Moderat script and Engrosser script taper. Or don't taper, rather. Wonky net? Uh-oh. Paul discourages the wiggle? Well, Paul doesn't do ornamental penmanship. If you're doing Engrosser script, it's different. That is a totally different stroke. So copperplate, which is what Paul normally would be teaching, this probably won't be exactly right, but if I was doing this in Engrosser script, I would be coming up, I would be coming down, and then I would be coming out of it. So I would maintain that even thickness on both sides. That is not ornamental penmanship, that is not Spencerian, that is Engrosser script, round hand, copperplate. Two totally different strokes, which is why this stroke is really difficult if you're trained in any of those scripts. So Paul's not wrong. Paul is 100% correct. It's just he was not teaching what we're doing today. This song is louder than the other ones. It's got a bit of a vibe to it. Cha-cha. I'm learning like 3 different scripts. Careful dive. I don't want to ever tell people not to do that, because that's what I did basically. But make sure that when you are working on each individual script, if you're going to do multiple, that you're fully understanding the differences between the scripts you're doing. Otherwise, each kind of leak into one another, and it makes doing any of them well very much more difficult. I often explain that like video games. If anybody understands or knows video games, you could play a game, and if you play like an adventure game, you pick either you're like a range fighter, or you're a magician, or you're the hand-to-hand melee tank guy. Either you pick one of those 3. You can play the game and do all 3 of them at the same time, but it means you have to play the game more than 3 times as long to get as high in all 3 of those levels as somebody who just picked one and focused on it. So if you're going to do more than one at a time, I can't tell you not to do that, because that is what I did, but know that if you're doing more than one at a time, the focus, attention, and time that have to go into it to get out what you would if you were putting in one at a time is more than 3 times as long, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's really easy to overwhelm. I like the idea of 2 scripts, because you work on one, and you can take a break from that one and work on the other one, and you can give them enough focus so long as you're paying enough attention to each of them. Is my video... Are we chopping up a little bit? Hopefully that goes away. Sorry, Ashok. It could be my computer. It does do that from time to time. But nothing has changed on my screen. It still says that we have an excellent connection. So hopefully it's not on this end. We'll see. So you'll notice right away one of the big differences between my stroke and the stroke in the books is I'm much more narrow coming into it and coming out of it. I need to stretch out as a whole. Not the downstroke. The downstroke, like, that's a good shade, tapering top to bottom. But I want to get in the habit of starting a little bit farther to the left and finishing just a little bit farther to the right. That's good. Like I said, doing 3 is fine. And there's, I mean, the third one you're doing, if I read correctly, is modern penmanship, which doesn't have as many solidified rules and stuff like that in it. So I would say you focus on the other 2 for the rules, and then modern penmanship can be playtime, basically. And your engrosser script and copperplate will help in the expression of the modern penmanship as you practice it. But don't let the freedom of the modern penmanship leak into the engrosser script or copperplate training. That is a no-no. Oh, too narrow. Yep, I mean, well, this is what I'm writing now, basically. This is just a standard ornamental penmanship V. Yay, I'm glad it's back to normal. Because also, one thing I'm doing today that I haven't done in the past, I'm streaming out of my computer at full 1080p. Normally, I shrink it down as it leaves my computer to 720, so still high definition, but not as much. But today, I did a test earlier this afternoon, and it seemed to work okay. So I'm streaming out in 1080p today, so this should be the highest quality late night live ever. And the replay should be replayable in higher quality than the past ones. Fingers crossed. I don't know if you'll even notice the difference, but hopefully. All right, now I want to try this stroke right here. I'm going to give this one a shot. So the entry is much more, if you notice the difference between the entry from the drill that we were doing. I was just doing it one at a time, but from that drill, the entry for this one, we are now following the same idea as the entry stem or entry curve we did last week and the one we did earlier today. So that same curve, and then we're coming down back to meet it here. Now I don't like stopping here at the bottom, but it's gotta be in the books for a reason, so we're gonna try to do it that way a little bit. And maybe it'll fix why I don't like this stroke. Okay. So wider and then coming down right beside where we started. Blech. That's not the way it's supposed to look. So take a quick note here. Because they have this long curve at top, their downstroke essentially starts, where's my pencil? They're essentially starting their downstroke right about here. Starting at the same place as this one started, right here. But because it's an entry stem to a capital, there's this long rounded curve. We wouldn't start it up here quite as much, because then we'd be into too much shade, and the shade has to be in the middle of that compound curve part. Right there. If that makes sense. So we gotta hold off the shade a little bit until we're on that downstroke pulling down along our slant line. It's not an easy one, that is for sure. And I will 100% admit that I have never, in my ornamental penmanship practice, given this this entry stroke or this drill, lifting like that, pretty much any attention whatsoever. So I am 100% in beginner mode today. Trying to figure it out. So there's our shape. Get that in our system a few times. Like everything. I do everything in hairline first till it's in your muscles. Oh, come on, Nib. Work with me here. Oh, this happens to me. This first one, I'm happy with that. Started in this right spot, ended in the right spot. Little bottom heavy, but it's not bad. Oh, that works. It could be your Queen of Hearts. What is it, around her neck? The little rough thing. Right. This one, I'm much more stressed out than I should be. This is a tough one. I don't like being bad at things. Whoa. Just miss after miss after miss. We gotta start that shade a little bit higher. There we go. Yeah! Booyah! Yes, of course. Here, I'll try to leave the example be in the bottom corner. I can place it so it's in the screen there, and then I'll try not to cover it up all the time, just sometimes. That's bigger than what we're writing today, but I guess doing it their way, doing the stroke this way, really teaches you when to start applying the weight, more so than doing it like the V did a little bit. Marilyn, it exists. You can get it on the book if you go to IAMPITH or archive.org. Lessons in Ornamental Penmanship by C.P. Zahner. I believe it's also, I think it's linked in the Discord description. This is from that book, so you can also get it there if you want. It looks like an alien head, kind of. Do aliens have noses? Sure, this one does, and he's making a face like that. Maybe that's not... Doesn't really look like an alien anymore. This looks like a weird shaped human head. What? Totally forgot what stroke I was doing. Confusion. There we go. My mom used to draw Casper all the time when she was a kid. So did I. I don't remember how to draw him anymore, though. How do you judge it against the slant? So, basically, your slant is the... Here, let me write on their example. My examples are all over the place, so I'm gonna write on their example. Okay, so for the slant, red pen. If we compare it to, like right here, our slant line, 52 degrees or whatever it is in this instance, that same line is what's, if this is the middle of our stroke, the very middle of that shade, it's the same that same angle. So our shade is going, we have that line, in the frame, from here down to the bottom, we're just getting a compound curve. If this is our middle point, right there, we're curving in and out of that point. That makes sense? So on that downstroke, our thickest point is right here. So we're like so, and thinnest point is right here. So if we were to bisect, if we were to cut in the wiggle in half, we get that. I hope that made sense. So the slant is going along the inside of that stem stroke. So if you imagine where the hairline, where it goes to hairline and where it ends in hairline, those are our two, the point between those is where our slant is. What is the angle of my paper placement? Actual angle? I have no idea. Do you mean in regards to the, in reference to the table? I'm not honestly sure. I've never measured it. I write so my downstroke, my slant line, is directly going out of my body most of the time. Sometimes it's slightly to one direction or the other, but on average, when I set up a sheet of paper like this to write, I have my camera set up so it's flat for you guys, but I'm writing so that this right here is going straight out from my body. So my slant line, whether it's 52 degrees, 45 degrees, 47 degrees, whatever it is, that slant line is away from my body. So to illustrate that a little bit better, I don't know if this should be visible on camera, but if I get like one of my guide sheets, for example, this guide sheet is printed at 48 degrees. I don't reference my table at all, because I know, like at the Zenarian in the books, they reference like this top corner of the desk and that bottom corner of the desk, but depending on the size of your desk, that's going to differ. All the students at the Zenarian trained at the same size desk, so that was an easy thing. Standard school desk worked. I don't like to do that because if I'm at a long table or a different desk, things change. So I like to reference everything off of myself. So on this grid sheet, let me zoom out for you guys. So there, you can see my desk is going this way in the frame. So this would be straight from my body. This is at a 48-degree slant line, this one. So I turn the paper, so 48-degree slant line is directly away from my body. If I was writing, let's say I was writing, trying to be like Mataraz, and my slant angle was more angled than this, I don't know if this is 45, but this is it. Nor are these lines straight. But if I was following those lines, which are more angled, I would rotate the paper that way. So what changes when I do that, my downstrokes are the same, which are the strokes I have, they give me the most difficulty, the part I have the most trouble with. So my downstrokes for my stem shades and everything stay the same. The difference then is my traveling between strokes. So if I was doing lowercase letters, I have to travel a little bit. I'm at a little bit more of an angle here, going away when I'm writing a letter or a word than if I was writing at a 57-degree or a 52-degree angle. I would be writing less away from my body and more to the right, if that makes sense. So it changes my connective angle a little bit, but I like my downstroke angle to always be approximately the same. Now today, I'm not using a grid sheet, so I have no idea what angle I'm writing at. It's not something I'm really thinking about. I'm just writing so that my downstroke, so that it looks approximately the way I want it to, and it's probably around 52 to 48, somewhere in that range. Sorry, Fozzie. This is a tough stroke. I mean, there's a reason I haven't dedicated nearly as much time to it as I should have over the years. But when it comes to angle, that's one of those things also when I'm writing, I sort of made the choice that when I'm writing without a specific slant angle on my guide sheet, I keep it the same. So as long as my paper is always the same, and then some people ask, well then after you, like when you start writing, if I don't have a guide sheet, how do I know what my slant is? The first stroke that I do, so or like this stroke here, if I decide this is a good stroke, then the slant line of that stroke, which is right here, every time as I'm moving down the page, if I'm about to start this one, I can look up there to that stroke and be like, cool, is that one letter, is that downstroke straight away from my body? It is? Perfect. Then this one will be approximately the same because I'm trained to always do my downstrokes and my stems straight coming down to my body. And that's slightly different for different people. People work at slightly different angles. This is just where I am comfortable at the moment. Certain letters I can write better at different angles of the paper, like I've discussed in the past, rotating the paper a little bit for ascending strokes or things like that for lowercase letters. But I'm trying to train myself to do everything at one angle. And then if I rotate the paper a little bit to make it easier, cool. But I want to be able to do everything at one uniform angle. So now, new sheet of paper. And this will be a perfect example because I'm starting a new sheet of paper without a guide sheet. So what angle am I going to write it at? Let's see. I'll show you guys another little another little technique that I use for getting my paper the same. Again, nothing to do with the table. It's all with me. When I hold my pen here, let's see where I am on the page. When I hold my pen, so if I'm ready to write, for me, for my grip and the way my pen sits when I do ornamental penmanship, 48 degrees approximately. If I set my page to 48 degrees, my nib is lined up straight away from my body. the angle that from my eye, it might be different looking from other angles and camera angles and stuff like that, but to my eye, when I come above and I look at the angle that my pen takes here, the pen, and you can see it on the camera right now, is going along even with the angle of my paper. My pen and my paper are at the same angle. My nib is pointed at 90 degrees straight out from me. So if, in theory, if I always write that way, then I'm going to be always writing at one angle. For me, I believe this is about 48 degrees. Now, where that rule doesn't work is if I want to write at 52 degrees or 45 degrees. 52 degrees, my hand stays where it is because I want all my writing to be the same, but this would be 45 degrees, so my pen is no longer exactly lined up with the page, and this would be probably like 52 degrees, so again, not the same as my paper. But for me, that is sort of my cheat guide for setting up my paper angle from the get-go. I don't think I've ever explained that to anybody before. It's not an exact science. I think that may be one of the reasons why. There's a little bit of figuring out in there. Let's zoom you guys back in here. This is a pretty song. Sort of. Pretty or weird. I can't really decide. So you've adjusted your flange to that angle too. Yes. Yeah, so my flange is set up specifically for that. I've messed with my angle of my flanges and stuff a whole lot, and this is just where it's comfortable. And that just falls in. Like the pen aligned with the paper thing was never something I tried to do. It was oh, well, look. Because I often, as you guys know, I write with guide sheets that have slant line on them. And when I write at that slant line, that's just sort of how it ends up working. So I use it as a visual reference. I think I get that from being a dancer, I guess, basically. When you're on stage and you have a specific spot, the choreographer or the director will tell you, this is your spot, so every time we cut and go back to the beginning, it's as a dancer, they hire us because we go back to the exact same spot, and there's not usually a piece of tape or anything that tells you where your spot is. So when they tell you it's your spot, you do a quick analysis of everything around you. You go, okay, cool, I'm lined up with that little thing and that tile and that thing over there and that thing over there. That's my spot. So then, moving forward, every time I go back to...
Here it is.
Whoa!
That's my spot.
My Google is spying on me. So every time you go back to the beginning, it's just a natural thing to find those reference points. Okay, this really hard stroke. Here we go. One easy way to cheat as well, if you're recording a live video and you have your camera set up so that the right angle is flat, every time I want to make sure my paper's at the right angle, I can just look at my camera. When I see that it's flat for you guys, I know I'm at the right angle. So I can ignore all that other stuff. Good night, Lori. Thank you very much for hanging out. Maybe I won't explode your brain next week. We'll do something more chill maybe next week. Woo! That is a good shaped stroke right there. If I can just do that again, that would be lovely. Is that zoomed in enough for you guys? Zoom you in a little more. Sirens. Okay, that is the shape I want. There we go. It's dialing in that shade placement. Here the shade's too low, here the shade's too high. Here it was good, perfect. Just not quite big enough. And then we went back too low again. Just dialing in that feeling. In movement writing, it all happens in a fraction of a second. So, haha, work time. Whoa! This is way too compound curvy. I gotta smooth that out quite a bit. That's good. I'm glad one of us is. No, I enjoy strokes that give me trouble because they are the ones I need to practice the most. And doing it this way definitely shows you exactly what you have to practice. Too sharp right here. There we go. That's what we want. Do that again. Almost. This is exactly how I feel when I practice doing ornamental penmanship or doing signatures and whatnot. That ending stroke that has, it's actually better than I normally do it. That stroke there, to me, it's the exact same issue. It's the compound curve and placing the shade right in the middle of that compound curve. It's so easy for it to end up too low or too high. So this is one of the, it's the exact same issue, and I have it in multiple compound curve strokes. It gives me trouble. How would you transition from the lowest point of that shade into, say, a capital U? So you would just continue out of it. Doing the actual letter, I would not stop at the bottom like we're doing here. If I was doing a capital U, I would continue through, similar to how they do in this stroke right here. I would continue it going that way. So if I was gonna do a U, I would just keep going. That's a V, not a U. A U would go into an underturn. Whoops. Like that. And then down. That is a very nice U. A little wide, but better than an average U for me, as far as shade-wise. So if you were doing the shade, or if you were going through, I wouldn't stop there. Potentially, some penmen did. I don't know that I've ever read specifically recommending stopping at that point on the U. I'm certain some did it, but for me, it is because there's no hard stop there, I personally wouldn't stop. I only like to stop when there's a lift or something like that. Downstroke, ascent shade issue on you. Or accent shade. On this downstroke, on the hairline downstroke, that's an easy one to fix. Just don't put any pressure. All right, back to our drill here. There is, like I said before, I've never done this one a whole lot. There is something to doing it this way that is helping in getting that shade placement. Easier said than done. Yep. That's ornamental penmanship in general, I would say. It's all pretty easy stuff. It's just doing it all at the same time. Whoops. Jeez. Can I repeat that again? Repeat what? Sorry, specifically, what was I talking about? Sorry, I don't know exactly what I said. The last thing I said was that ornamental penmanship in general is easy. It's just a bunch of easy stuff put together that make it really hard. But I don't know if that's what you wanted me to repeat. The shape of this stroke. There we go, that's a little better. This is another one where right before I do it, if I remind myself to make my downstroke or my shade with my arm and not my fingers, it seems to help me. Is there any difference in the space inside the V and the U? The underturn is the same. The space on the inside is going to be different just because the U comes out with an undercurve and the V comes out with a compound curve. So yeah, because the V is just this. So as far as the stroke we're doing is the same for both. But yeah, the one, because it's an undercurve versus a compound curve, it's going to be slightly, the V is going to look more condensed above the baseline. A capital Y is the exact same as a U. There we go. Like half or 1/3 less. Ish. Depends on sort of the spacing of a hole. I wouldn't necessarily tie a number into it. One is, if you imagine a V coming down and then going back up right on the slant line, like if there was no compound curve. Whereas, similar to how we write the A U has to come down on the slant line, so we can't go up on the 52-degree slant line. We have to come up in an undercurve, so that we can come down on the 52-degree slant line to come out, if that makes sense. So it can't be as condensed. This is a drill I should have done, or should have been doing for years. Don't get in trouble. Starting to get a little better. Yeah, we got an interesting vibe with the music right here. Changing up the energy. Oops. Or there's thunder. I can't hear the thunder sounds in my speakers. Sorry. So this is another one of those strokes that when you force it, you get these type of issues. But if you let it just come out naturally, similar to what I was talking about at the very beginning today with the Z stroke, if you just naturally let it come out of the pen easily the way it wants to, it'll work better. Again, easier said than done, but oh, is it choppy right now? It looked a little choppy for a moment there on my screen. I wonder why. My computer had a hiccup. Nope. What up? Diane Dual Pen in the house. How's it going, man? We are working on a stem stroke that I am no good at today. So, which is why all of what you see on the screen is not uniform and is different. Because this is a stroke that I am practicing. I'm like a beginner right now practicing this one. I've always kind of ignored it and relied on luck. There we go. That's what we want. Let's do more of those. Nah. This is only our practice now. Eventually this will look back fondly at these practice sessions and think, ho ho ho, how silly I was when I couldn't make that stroke. How silly of me. how unproficient I was. That's good. Little speed is good. Get a nice smooth stroke for this one. Not enough curve. No, this shade should be like so. It should be tapered evenly from the thick point, or from the hairline to the thick point and back to the hairline again. Unlike in engrosser script and copperplate, where they're straight-sided, and you would often see as well, this goes into sort of what we were talking about at the beginning of today. We discussed, like, you could see this one sometimes done this way. Let's do it slow so I can illustrate it. Like so, where the inside is flat and the outside has the bubble, which is not wrong because people wrote it that way, but that's not what that's not what I'm going for today. The standard sort of traditional style of that stroke is an even taper from top to bottom. Because alternatively, that stroke, I could put the shade on the other side. If I did my left tine straight, then you could have something like that, where my left tine is straighter and my right tine bubbles out. So I think those are the stylistic choices, or sometimes potentially mistakes, of penmen of the old, of the older penmen. But for the most part, what I see the most taught is the even taper, which is sort of seen in most Spencerian strokes. No Spencerian strokes at all really maintain an even straight line on any side. The one place where I tend to try to break that, it's not a rule, but where I sort of break that a little bit, is in descended strokes, which we haven't covered yet in these lives. But a descended stroke, like if I was doing a Y, for example, and I was coming down, I'm writing slow so I can properly get these illustrated for you guys. If I was coming down, that's a little long, but I personally like having the inside of that shade being flat and the outside be the part that bubbles out. The same could be said for the J. Yeah, the J. I like when the shade is on the outside of that one and the inside is straight. Doing the Q is the exact opposite, or this variation of the Q anyways. Nope, that's a G. So the G follows the same rule. I went the wrong direction. The Q does, in fact, like I said, go the opposite direction. Wait, I did the same thing again. Come on, brain. Stop doing the exact same thing. A Q, rewind. I feel like I'm in a loop. The Q goes the opposite, where the right tine stays straight. Like so. So this inside is straight and the outside has the bubble. If that makes sense. I'm sorry about that. I got stuck in a little loop. I kept doing the same thing over and over again. But so on the Descenders, that's how I like it to look. A lot of the old penmen would have it be an even taper down. Oftentimes it would end up being on the outside anyways, because it would be flowing down into that stroke, so the outside would naturally be what would bubble out a little bit. And same with the Q. because it turns the other way, naturally the tine can shoot out to the left a little bit. But that's just again a stylistic choice. But on the V and the U and the top of the Y, it's always, for me anyways, a shooting for an even taper. Oh, I lost a lot of people all of a sudden. Did my connection get messed up, or did people just leave? How do you have the kind of nib control? Any pragmatic pointers? Like specifically when I'm demonstrating this going slow, that's just years of slow writing and controlling the nibs. I wouldn't say there's any real like secrets or tips or pointers. It's really just doing that stroke over and over again and getting used to where the energy gets pushed, if that makes sense. Because the same type of manipulation is used in like standard stem strokes, where you're shooting it. In my mind, I'm shooting the right tine out more so that I can get it a little bit flatter along the bottom. So I get this nice even flow with the left tine, where the right tine is staying on the slant line a little bit longer and then cutting in. So that's just more of a where that energy is being pushed, so where it's forcing the tine out. That's done with nib rotation and slow manipulation when you write slow, whereas when you go fast, it's where that energy is sort of thrown, if that makes sense. So one thing I don't do as well, the descended strokes, when I do those at speed, I'm not as good at getting the weight where I want to, as I am when I do it slowly. Obviously, it's much easier when you go slow, but the goal, like on a Y or anything like that, or a J, you want to be able to come up, and then it's just where the energy is. Like as I'm coming here, it's just sort of my energy is pulling. When I do the weight, I'm just pushing a little bit down to this side, down this way. Another way to think about it, and I'm sure some penmen did it this way as well, this downstroke, you could also think of it as being like this, where the downslope slightly curves to the right. And then when I'm shading, I could be shading even taper on both sides, but because my path is curved, it's an illusion that makes the inside straight. Both of those two scenarios, me pushing energy or me curving my hairline, could be the exact same thing, like muscular-wise and everything. It's in my brain, I think of it as two different ways of thinking of it, and it's just those pushing the energy one way is what works for me. They might be the exact same thing, essentially two ways of thinking of the same thing. Possibly, I don't know. It's a lot to happen in a fraction of a second to really break down that much. But yeah, repeat. You just keep practicing, basically, is the way to get those that way. Like, I find with the Q, getting the shade on the right side of the Q, I think is a little bit easier. These shades are a little too low. But doing this one, I find it a little bit easier to keep the inside flat. It's the same with the stem stroke that comes around. Like Michael Saul will use this one quite a bit. We're coming here. If we're gonna do like a capital B, for instance. This one, it is nice to have the inside straight and the outside round, but again, that's a stylistic thing. That is how I taught it for many years when I would write slow, and that's how I usually write it when I go slow. When I go fast, that will be cool, but this shade with the inside being straight and the outside being round, this shade is not the same fundamental as this shade. Doing the V versus doing that shade on a B or a P, this would be more similar to these ones. So a separate shade that we haven't really talked about yet in these lives. I hope that made sense. I just blabbed a whole lot there. I guess essentially boiling down to, for me, the only time they're asymmetrical like that is on the descended strokes or on the rounded stem strokes for the B, P, and the R. But not for the V, U, and the Y. Those are symmetrical. Tapers with the wiggly bits in the middle. Does any book discuss this shade analysis? There are books that display it. There was a PDF. I have a PDF, but I don't know if it's on my website. When this live is over, I will look for it, and if it isn't on my website, I'll put it in the description of this video, and I will put it on the Discord. If you guys want to check it out. It is not the be-all and end-all of shade analysis, but it is a small, just two-page article on shading. But I don't think it really discusses that one too much, to my knowledge. One thing you will find, very few, if none, of the books really describe or analyze the shades as much as we do today. Even the ones that analyze and talk about it, they don't do the grids and the discussions about the shapes and the stuff that I was kind of shying away from on the Discord last week. None of the books did that. If the old penmen did that, I've never seen it. They talk about analysis and its visual comparisons, but breaking it down mathematically and stuff like that is not something you see. It's not something I've seen any of the great penmen do. That's not to say it can't be done, but it's not something that was a common thing. Even like breaking down the origin of the shade, how I talk about the arm versus the finger, that type of stuff, it didn't seem to be put in any of the books or anything like that. It was probably talked about in classes where students would ask specific questions, maybe, but yeah, I think all that analysis, I mean, it's the same way I talk about doing it. It's you look, you analyze, and you repeat, and you figure it out without relying on the mathematics or the things like that. Not something that was commonly seen, to my knowledge anyways. Ooh, that's a good one. It's like every once in a while, a good one comes out. They're not consistent yet, though. But they will be. I know what I'm doing this week. Whoops. Bah! Yeah, they're good, and then they go out the window. Consistency. Yeah. That's the thing. A lot of the books, it's basically like, here, do this. And then you just do it. They don't really talk about it that much. I think part of the process of figuring it out, as I like bringing you guys into sort of my practice world, because I talk about the little, like, for lack of a better word, revelations that I have when I notice, like, oh, if I focus on this and this, and blah, 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 If I were trying to do like a grid and a shape, I wouldn't discover those things. It's like the learning on the path. If you don't, or like trying to figure it out, is how you, in my sort of opinion and how I like to think about it, that's how it gets ingrained in your system. After continued practice on the other shades, this one will be found difficult. Yep. Like, yeah, if you do the other ones, you'll have trouble with this one. Boom. Good luck. That's basically what it boils down to. And he's not wrong. I feel like Tamblyn, more than any of the other authors, any other penmen, was much more cutthroat in just like, figure it out. Do it this fast, make it work. He was like, no nonsense. It seems like, anyways. Like, what, you can't do it? Why not? Just figure it out. Do it. But I can't. Well, try harder. I'm not sure that I would enjoy his personality in person, but I like reading it. Hey, Pollock. Welcome. We could, that would be technically, whoops, that would be the next, that would be the next step. We would go from this one, alternating from our previous ones. I wouldn't alternate from the swan quite yet. My first one, I would start by using the same entry. Whoops. Our first stem stroke into this one. Whoa, doing those back to back feels very weird. Next time I come to Manila, Fozzie, I'll teach a Tamblyn class. Just for fun, just for you. I'll teach like him. If I were teaching like private students, one-on-one, I would be, it's much more sort of no nonsense. I know what somebody sees and what I think they need to do. I would just tell them to do it. Gotta figure it out. It's like how my class is ruthless in its speed. You gotta go fast. If you can't go fast, you gotta go fast. Yo, this is officially the first time I've ever done this. Going back and forth between these two strokes. This is like I'm doing mental exercises here right now. Zoom one-on-one, like Zoom privates? I could teach Zoom privates. I never really thought about that before. I wanted to start a series of like half digital, half analog, private one-on-one tutoring sort of things, but then COVID happened, and I'll be honest, I haven't been very good at getting things I need to get done right now. Fozzie's been badgering me about, not badgering, but reminding me about a few things that I'm supposed to be doing that I've said I was going to do and haven't done quite yet. I'm not very good at being organized these days. The only thing that's organized is my late night lives, and they're not all that organized. Pollock, right now we are practicing not technically letters, we're doing stem strokes. So the fundamental aspects of the capital letters in ornamental penmanship or Spencerian. But we're not making real letters. We're working on the fundamental strokes that are used to create letters. For example, like this stroke right here is what's used to create like the U, for example, in Spencerian script. Will I be coming to Russia? I would like to. I think there was, prior to everything crazy that happened, I was supposed to be working on a plan to go, was it Belarus? Which is not Russia, but it's over there. I would like to go to Russia. I've never been. I would like to go anywhere. I will go anywhere people will want me to be, basically, when it comes to teaching penmanship or teaching anything for that matter. Once I'm allowed to do that again. An upside down guide sheet still has the same angle, so you're good. 38 degrees. What? No, upside down would just be the same angle. If I have my sheet, this is my guide sheet, is at 52 or 48. Sorry, if I turn it upside down, it's still 52. It's still the same angle. If you're using like a connective slant or something different, I guess. It should be. Yeah. I use my guide sheets upside down all the time. They don't really, they only have a bottom because I have my signature on the bottom, but my old ones didn't. They were just, the top was whatever one happened to be at the top. If you read anything about paper type / brands in the Business Educators, they talk about different papers, foolscap and things like that. Brands and whatnot, a lot of the time in the Business Educator, the papers that they recommend were the Zenarian papers, like they sold paper and whatnot. But I probably have and just not really remembered it. There's stuff in there, but I've never really paid much attention to it. A lot of the articles I have not fully read through. I primarily am visual with the old magazines, with the exception of the lessons and whatnot that I pulled out. I haven't read many of the articles. Shade distribution, we have discussed it a couple times. It's just even. It's from that downstroke, as we're going down, the shade is, it's a curved line, it's compound curve. The shade is even taper to the outside. So shade is completely symmetrical on both sides. It doesn't stay straight inside or outside, like an engrosser script. So it continues having that wobbly middle. But yeah, we've touched on it a couple times in here. 11:50 already. These ones go by so quick when I'm practicing, more so than when I'm just writing words and stuff. When I'm doing this is drilling. Thank you. What do you practice in the late night lives? Sometimes, Pollock. Last week, I had started this sort of analysis and practice of the capital stem strokes and shades. So this one is a continuation from last week. But prior to that, I haven't had any that really continue over. Oftentimes, some have different specific topics. Like I was illustrating the way I break down signatures, or people would request names and I would write them, or we filled a quote journal one day. It's kind of different all the time. Like I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I'm gonna start doing, I think, the Sixling and Sunday challenge again. So I may use the late night lives to break down some of the signatures. Haven't decided yet. But there's always different topics. I usually post on Instagram what I'm going to be talking about. Sometimes I'm not talking about anything specific. I'm just here talking, playing around, just practicing whatever I feel like. Last week and this week were much more structured in topics that I wanted to discuss. Yeah, probably mine too, Fuzzy, don't worry. But they're not always this practice or drilly. This is just a topic that I've been wanting to touch on for quite a while. But ladies and gentlemen, I know it's right before midnight. I don't think we're gonna make it into Blacklight Live today. I have a big day tomorrow, and I have a few things I gotta do tonight before I go to bed. So I'm ready for tomorrow. So I'm going to cut this one off. I think we touched on basically everything I wanted to touch on today. We didn't get into the Ascender Stroke ones, but I think I'll save that one for another day. Everything we did today, like last week, was very condensed. We did a couple lines of each sort of exercise. Each one of those exercises, if you watch this again from the beginning, and I will timestamp things so you can skip past a few things once everything is processed through YouTube. But if you watch it again, each one of the exercises we talked on, that's a step. That's a do this until it feels really, really comfortable, until the old books say till you've mastered it. When you've mastered it, then you do the next one. We've mastered none of the exercises we did today, but I wanted to illustrate them for you. And then when you go to your practice sessions and you're working on them, you do them one at a time, fill pages of them, not with the objective of filling the page, but as always, trying to improve and get each one better and relax each time until the page is full. So, yeah, this was a good one. Again, I mean, we did a stroke that I'm not very good at all today, which is something that doesn't happen all that often. So I definitely have homework. I hope you had fun. Make sure that you are falling in love with the process. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that life should be just a bit of silliness, really. All right? We are ending the live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I missed the button. 1, take 2.